Hello and welcome to this ACCA video. If you're studying for the ACCA Strategic Business Leader exam, this video is aimed at you. My name's Sean Purcell and I have years of experience in helping students pass their ACCA exams. In this video, we're going to debrief question 1, and there are other videos in the series which will debrief the remaining questions. The aim of these videos is to give you some practical tips on how you might approach strategic business leader questions so as to gain exam confidence and maximise your success when attempting the real exam. Before we start looking at the question, I'm assuming that you've attempted the question and have a copy of the exam to hand. Question 1A is broken into two parts, and the first part asks us to analyse the financial and non-financial issues which will affect the decision of whether to accept a contract. In Part B, we're asked to discuss the difficulties in fulfilling the criteria stated by the Transport Minister. Before we get involved in the details of the question, there's a set of 6 practical steps that I think we should follow on every single strategic business leader question. And they are: what role are we being asked to play? What format is the answer required in? Who are we addressing, i.e., who's our audience? What verb's being used? What's it asking us to do? How many marks are being awarded? And what are the professional skills marks being awarded for? If we always ensure we ask these 6 questions before developing our answer plan, the chances of getting something wrong will be minimised. Let's now look in more detail at the question and see how we can deal with the requirements. Let's look at question 1 in a bit more detail. As we can see, it's broken up into 2 parts, with both parts requiring a briefing paper. As with all questions, let's apply our 6 steps. So in Part A, who are we? What is our role? Well, we're a senior non-executive director. What format is required? We're required to produce a briefing paper. Who is the audience? It's the board. What verbs are being used? Well, we're asked to analyse both financial and non-financial. How many marks are being awarded? There's 18 technical marks and 4 professional marks, and professional skills marks are awarded for analysis skills. So they're the key starting points with every question we do on strategic business leader. If we just remind ourselves of the professional skills marks which are granted for analysis, in summary, we need to investigate all the relevant information, so we need to be bringing in what all the exhibits tell us. We need to make sure that we inquire and come to appropriate conclusions from this information, and we reflect on their implications and consider it all carefully. As always, these professional skills headings should be the lens through which we gain our technical marks. In terms of where we're going to get some of this information from, well, having maybe annotated the exhibits, we see Exhibit 3 giving us some figures, we see Exhibit 1 talking about expected returns, and we see Exhibit 2 talking about financial and non-financial criteria. There's also indication in the introduction where the terrain in B is a bit more mountainous and prone to flooding. Final thing we don't forget about is timing. Again, please read in more detail the examiner's guidance over your shoulder article, which you can see on the ACCA website. This lets us know that when we have a mark, we should be allocating 2.5 minutes. We've got 18 marks here, so 45 minutes is the time allowed. As that article explains, professional skills marks don't take up any time, but in order that our time is managed properly, please write down the time you start the question and the time you're due to finish it, so we don't go over on our time. So the key fundamentals before we even think about anything technical, but let's now look at the technical stuff. The first point I'm going to start at is think like a builder in a real workplace to try to focus my thoughts. We've got to think about financial. So if I was thinking about financial, I'm thinking about well, how much revenue can I earn? And the thing I need to weigh that up against is how much is it going to cost me? So from the information we have in the scenario, what can that tell us about how much revenue we can earn? Well, Exhibit 3, you will have noticed, gives quite a lot of figures, and we can work out here that we are likely to receive 21,000 and it's going to cost us 19,000, so we're going to make a margin of 9.5%. So it's important we put that in context, and the context we can put that in is in Exhibit 1. It talks about the minimum profit that management are likely to accept is of 8%. So 9.5% is clearly more than 8%, so that makes it quite financially attractive. And in Exhibit 2, we're given various information about the fact that it floods during the wet season, and that can cause delays. It could even make the road impassable. So all of these could have a major impact on the viability of the project and the reliability of the estimates. It talks about low price is important when choosing a contract. It talks about the job being done very efficiently, as short as possible. It also says the government will guarantee debt finance. Also, we, when undertaking the project, want to limit our environmental footprint. So quite a few points there that we could develop. So if I summarise some of those points and think about how they're going to affect the actual costs, well, we could think first of all about the terrain and how that could impact, subject to flooding. Also, the estimates were based on work we've done already, which is mainly been flat and dry. It talks about low price, but that could contrast to what value we can create for our shareholders. Positive is if we can rely on all the figures, the return is better than what the board would typically accept. However, we want to do things efficiently in a short time, but we want it done at a low price. That kind of is a bit in conflict, and to limit an environmental footprint is likely to cost quite a bit. Other things that we pick up from Exhibit 1 is that if any failure is a fundamental threat to the company, so we have to consider that. The future going concern of the organisation could be seriously jeopardised. Also, failure to maintain liquidity and meet loan repayments could also jeopardise the business, but maybe we can get some government finance. So quite a few points there just picking out of the case. Good students who would attempt this paper would make some sense out of all of the financials here, and if we look at each of these financials, it gives us when we're actually going to get paid, and this tells us the costs and when we're likely to incur them. So on the side here, I've put into those figures the actual outgoings and incomes, and we can see that actually for the whole of the project we're pretty much in negative cash position, so that's going to require funding. Only at the very end do we actually make our surplus. So there's 5 years of activity, or 4 years of activity rather, where money's coming in and money's coming out. There's serious risk there if some of those costs overrun, and because the project is based on a lot of uncertainty, the likelihood of that happening is quite high. So there's a scan and an annotation of the exhibits. Could we be inspired to get some more applied marks from our general knowledge from our studies? Well, I would suggest that maybe if we thought about external opportunities and threats, inspiration for that for me would be Pestel and Five Forces. So if I'm applying this in the context of the situation here, what do I see? Well, maybe in country B, what if the government became unstable? Maybe. But economically, it talks about all countries having the same currency. It's definitely a positive because we won't have any problems with hedging. But also on economic, if that country has economic issues such as inflation, that would have a major impact on all the costings we've done. What about the work ethic? What about the culture? Do they work to the same level and output? I would be wanting to question that. That could seriously influence our costings. We're going to be employing people in another country. Do we have payroll systems? So that's going to be an issue. The mountains are likely to throw up more environmental risks, so that would be an issue. And we don't have any information about specific legal stuff within the country, such as working hours, minimum wages. Do we have to make pensions? They're all issues. If we took the 5 forces, the main one I'm thinking on 5 forces would be suppliers of labour, construction people, engineers, suppliers of specialist plant and machinery for roads, and suppliers of raw materials such as tarmac. So lots of points there. We obviously don't need all of them, but hopefully that gives you some confidence that there's many things that we could use to help develop our answer. With regards to how many marks we need, you will be aware from examiner articles that most of the marking schemes will award up to 2 marks for each well-developed point. The examining team have also made it clear that to get any marks at all, you must do more than just state some knowledge or a point from the exhibit. Knowledge always needs to be applied in the context of the case, and points from exhibits need to be explained in terms of their relevance to the requirements. This is what the examining team were referring to in the 10 Things to Learn article available on the website, when it talked about the what and why. However, although there are up to 2 marks available, if I was being prudent, I would acknowledge that students are maybe not always able to develop their points into a 2-mark answer. It's also the case that some points might be difficult to develop into 2 marks. My advice would be that I need to get a minimum of half of the total technical marks available to achieve a pass. In the case of this question, there were 18 technical marks, so I should be aiming for a minimum of 9 well-developed points. This will secure a pass, and likely to get more than 9 if the points are developed, but we will know we have secured a pass here. If we think back to our brainstorm, we came up with many points, and as I said, more than we would need. We had about 12 specific case points and about 9 inspired by our technical knowledge applied in the context of the case. So, how do these bullet points we've made manifest themselves into an actual real answer? Looking at the answer here, if we'd said the first part on profit margin, from figure in example exhibit 3, it seems that estimated profit margin of 9% is in excess of the board's minimum requirement of 8%. Well, that says the what as well as the why, and we would get a mark for that. But then this answer goes on further and talks about how the fact that because it is in excess of the minimum requirement of 8%, this will make it financially attractive and it will ensure that value is added to the shareholders. So an answer that develops with further points like that is much more likely to be worth 2 marks. Other things to pick up on what we've done here, we've used a subheading. Between each of our points, we would also leave a line. The whole point of this is to make the marker's job as easy as it possibly can be. So hopefully this gives us a good benchmark on the weight of answer we need to deliver and gives us confidence that we're all capable of delivering this in the real exam. If we move on to question B, this had 8 marks and 2 professional skills marks. The main exhibit, which I'm going to draw a lot of my points from here, would be exhibit 2. And I think the key point on this is asking us to discuss difficulties in fulfilling the criteria set out by the Transport Minister. Professional skills for commercial acumen, and really this is a trade-off between time, cost and the objectives of the project. As always though, let's start with our 6 steps. Who are we? Well, we're still Alex, the senior Ned. What's the format? It's still a briefing paper. Who are we talking to? The board. The verb is about discussing the difficulties. Marks are 8 technical and 2 professional skills for commercial acumen. So commercial acumen, is this worthwhile doing? In terms of professional skills on commercial acumen, think about when writing our answer, demonstrating awareness, using judgment and using insight to see the conflict between what is required by the Transport Minister and what we need to satisfy our shareholders. I think on both the professional skills marks, it is worth spending some time looking at the official answers and seeing the professional skills marking grid. This goes into some detail about professional skills marks which get 0, which are not so well, which are quite well, and which are very good. And there's quite a detailed matrix which I think you should spend some time looking at, and also looking at the article on professional skills mark available on the website. So, highlighting the key things I see that are going to inspire me. The first thing, it talks about how the road is going to resolve all problems of kind of flooding and traffic delays. Well, maybe. Low price is important, but at the same time they want it to be done quickly, and also they want disruption to a minimum. Some of those conflict, and we'll discuss that in our answer. We also want the Transport Minister wants the environmental footprint to be low when it's constructing the road. Well, again, to do that might cost more money, but they want it at a low price. And they also believe that the new road will give a big boost to the country's economy and a lasting achievement of the government. I'm not sure we can put that down to just a road, and hopefully CC aren't judged on that. To give a quick summary of the ideas we identified from reading through the exhibits, we talked about low price, we talked about a short timescale, we talked about the new road helping economic development, and we talked about keeping disruption to a minimum. In terms of the marks, well, there are 8 technical marks we need to get if we want to get 100%, which obviously we don't, we only need half of those. And in line with the advice we gave to part A of this question, that we should try to ensure 4 good points, which would secure us a minimum of 4 marks, obviously as long as we mentioned the what and the why, as described in the 10 things to learn from the September exam article. And hopefully, if we were to expand a little further on some of these points, we would hopefully move them into a 2-mark point, pushing our answer into a very good pass score. How might these points then manifest themselves into an actual answer? Well, here is a sample of what we might have said, and the first thing to recognise here would be the fact that we use a subheading. Yep, we also leave a little bit of white space between our points. All of this obviously to make the job of the marker as easy as possible. In terms of what we did here in our answer, we clearly identified the difficulty in a subheading and talked about how the fact that the contract is going to be awarded on low price, and then contextualise this further by talking about how it will not provide sufficient return for shareholders and also allow for no cushion to cost overruns. So again, that kind of point is moving towards more of a 2-mark answer than a 1-mark answer because of the way in which we develop and give reason. In the same way, we talked about the short timescale, and then we had synthesized the fact that if we're doing a short timescale, well, that's probably going to mean we have to work 24 hours a day. And what's that going to mean? Well, that's going to mean it's going to cost us more. Why? Because we're probably going to have to be paid overtime or night working. So really thinking and visualizing about the case. And also it could impact on the environment. So lots of points there to move that to a 2-mark question. Let's summarize what we have just done then. First thing I think we need to realize is we can't ignore the financial information, and in this question, candidates could have scored highly on the financial issues relating to the contract by using a range of knowledge from their financial management studies. Therefore, as accountants, we must ensure we have a good grasp of all the key financial management issues affecting organisations, because it's highly likely we will have to draw on them when developing our answers. Also, although professional skills marks were being awarded for commercial acumen in question 1B, candidates who used skepticism to question the government objectives also were able to probably score more technical marks. So don't feel constrained by just one set of professional skills marks. As always, make sure that we are very strict in the control of our time. So we're writing start and finish, and we're doing the marks per minute. And we also write it down on the screen, and we also have a mark focus. So our answer is delivering the marks that we need to be gaining, and not just a general answer. It's an answer to gain the marks that are being awarded. Finally, this is one of a series of question debriefs, and you'll find lots of other fantastic resources to help you with your exam preparation at accaglobal.com. Have a look at the examiner's report and also the examiner's answer. However, remember that the examiner's answer is designed for tutorial purposes and is much more than you'd be expected to do as a student in the real exam. It's also worth having a look at the 10 things to learn from the September 2018 SBL exam paper. I hope you found this debrief useful, and I'd like to wish you all the very best in your future studies.